Summer had always been the season of togetherness on Willow Creek Lane. The air carried the smell of freshly cut grass. Children's laughter rang through the cul-de-sacs, and backyards buzzed with life. For the Johnson family, this summer was special. After a long stretch of hardships, they wanted nothing more than to host a family barbecue, ribs sizzling on the grill, music humming low, and cousins running barefoot through the sprinklers. It was supposed to be simple, a day of joy, food, and memories, but on Willow Creek Lane, nothing stayed simple when Karen was involved. Karen had lived on the block for years, wielding her HOA membership like a sword. She was the self-proclaimed guardian of order, though her rules seemed to shift depending on who she was targeting. She scrutinized lawns, counted cars in driveways, and issued letters over Christmas lights hung too long. To most, she was an annoyance. To others, she was a nightmare. When she saw the Johnsons setting up folding tables and string lights, her lips curled with disapproval. To her, their laughter wasn't community, it was disruption. Their music wasn't culture, it was noise. And their gathering wasn't family, it was, as she later spat into her phone, an unauthorized event. By the time the ribs were halfway done, Karen had already called the HOA hotline, demanding immediate action. She stood across the street, arms folded, phone pressed against her ear, narrating every detail as if reporting a crime. The Johnsons tried to ignore her, but the mood shifted. Their guests noticed her glare, the way she scribbled notes onto her clipboard, and the sharpness of her whispers. What was meant to be joy became tainted by her watchful eyes. Then, the HOA representative arrived. A clipboard, a badge, and an apology that sounded more like a warning. They said someone had reported the barbecue. They mentioned possible fines, possible violations. The Johnsons were stunned. They weren't breaking any real rules. Grilling wasn't banned. Gathering wasn't restricted. But Karen's influence had always reached farther than the written code. Neighbors watched from porches. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered to one another. They had all been here before. Karen targeting, Karen complaining, Karen twisting rules into weapons. But this time felt different. The Johnsons hadn't done anything wrong, and everyone knew it. As the HOA official left, the Johnsons felt the weight of embarrassment settle in. Their celebration was bruised, their pride wounded. Children asked why the music stopped, why the laughter had quieted. Adults exchanged uneasy glances. Karen stood taller, satisfied, her mission seemingly accomplished. But what she didn't realize was that her call, her words, hadn't stayed private. Someone on the HOA line had recorded her, and her complaint wasn't just about grills or gatherings. It was about the Johnsons, about who they were, about the color of their skin. That recording began to spread, first through whispers, then through text messages, until nearly every house on Willow Creek Lane had heard the venom in Karen's voice. The shock it carried transformed into something else: anger, unity, and a decision that enough was enough. The Johnsons sat in their yard as the night grew darker, wondering if their barbecue had been ruined for good. But across the street, porch lights flickered on, doors opened, and neighbors began stepping out, one by one. The silence before the storm was ending. Something bigger than a barbecue was about to begin. By the next morning, Willow Creek Lane felt different. What had begun as a barbecue had turned into the spark of something bigger. The Johnsons' humiliation the night before lingered heavy in the air, but so did a quiet determination that spread from house to house. The recording of Karen's call had circulated quickly. Her words, sharp, cutting, dripping with prejudice, left no room for excuses. Neighbors who had once dismissed her as merely annoying now saw her for what she truly was, a bully cloaked in the language of HOA rules. For years, she had hidden behind fine print, manipulating it to target whoever she pleased. Now, she was exposed. The Lopez family remembered how Karen had tried to stop their teenage son from practicing basketball in the driveway. The Browns recalled her threats over their holiday lights. The Millers still had unopened envelopes of HOA fines stacked in a drawer, courtesy of Karen's endless complaints. Everyone had a story, and suddenly, those stories no longer felt isolated. Conversations started at mailboxes and across fences. Neighbors leaned closer, sharing frustrations they had bottled up for years. What once had been whispers now grew into a chorus. Karen had gone too far, and this time they weren't going to let it slide. Meanwhile, Karen strutted down the street as if she had already won. Her clipboard under her arm, sunglasses perched on her nose, she carried herself like a queen surveying her kingdom. She had no idea her words were spreading, no idea the HOA board itself had received the same recording, and no idea that the neighborhood she once divided was beginning to unite against her. By midweek, the Johnsons were no longer alone. Neighbors knocked on their door, offering words of support and sharing stories of their own harassment. The Johnsons, who had felt embarrassed and defeated just days earlier, found themselves at the heart of something extraordinary. They hadn't asked for it, but their backyard barbecue had become the rallying point for change. A group chat formed, pulling the street together in a way that had never happened before. Screenshots of Karen's messages, photos of her confrontations, and that damning audio clip became the evidence of her long reign of intimidation. For the first time, the neighborhood wasn't just talking about standing up, they were planning it. And as Friday approached, the plan took shape. If Karen wanted to ban barbecues, the neighbors would give her more than she could handle. Not just one grill, not just one family, but an entire block cooking, laughing, and celebrating at once. When the sun set that evening, neighbors gathered in driveways, leaning on fences, sharing quiet excitement. The Johnsons, still humbled by the support, looked around and saw what they had never seen before. An entire street standing together, ready to take back their peace. Karen had thought she ended a barbecue. What she had actually done was start a movement, and by Saturday afternoon, she was about to face the full force of it. Saturday arrived with the kind of sunshine that seemed almost symbolic, bright, warm, impossible to ignore. Willow Creek Lane, a street once known for silence and tension, was now alive with the sound of grills being wheeled out, folding tables unfolding, and children laughing as they ran from one yard to another. It wasn't one barbecue anymore, it was every barbecue. The Johnsons started first, setting up their grill just as they had the week before. But this time, they weren't alone. The Lopez family rolled out their smoker. The Browns brought a massive cooler filled with drinks. The Millers hung string lights between their trees. Yard after yard, driveway after driveway, flames sparked and smoke curled into the air, carrying the smell of burgers, ribs, chicken, and corn on the cob. By mid-afternoon, the entire block had transformed into a street-wide cookout. Neighbors mingled freely, passing plates across property lines, sharing stories and laughter that drowned out the memory of Karen's threats. Music drifted from speakers, blending with the crackle of grills and the chatter of children. What had been a fractured street now felt like a family. Karen's car appeared at the corner just as the first round of food was being served. She slowed, her sunglasses catching the glare of the sun, her expression tightening as she saw the impossible. Not one rule breaker, but an entire neighborhood standing shoulder to shoulder. She parked abruptly, grabbed her clipboard and stormed out. Her voice, shrill and commanding, cut through the air. This is against HOA policy. You can't all do this at once. I'll fine every single one of you. But this time, nobody flinched. Nobody backed down. The Johnsons were the first to turn and face her, but within seconds, dozens of eyes locked on to her, steady and unafraid. The Lopez family stepped forward. The Browns crossed their arms. Even the quiet Millers, who had avoided conflict for years, stood tall. Then came the sound that silenced Karen completely. Laughter. Not cruel, not mocking but unified. Unstoppable laughter that spread from one yard to the next until the entire block was roaring with it. Karen's clipboard trembled in her hand. Her power, once so absolute, evaporated in that moment. And then, the final blow, one of the neighbors, phone in hand, spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "We've already sent your recording to the HOA board. They know everything. Your reign is over, Karen. The color drained from her face. For years, she had relied on intimidation, on the silence of her neighbors, on the belief that nobody would ever band together. Now the silence was gone, replaced with unity too strong to break. She turned, stammered something about calling legal, and hurried back to her car under the weight of 100 victorious eyes. The street erupted in cheers as her car sped away. The music turned louder, the food kept cooking, and the celebration grew wilder. What had begun as an act of defiance had become a declaration. They were done living under fear. That night, under the glow of string lights and fading embers, the Johnsons looked around and realized something profound. Karen had tried to tear them apart, but in the end, she had done the opposite. She had brought them together. From that day forward, Willow Creek Lane was different. Not because Karen disappeared, she still lurked, still sent her petty emails, still tried her tricks, but it no longer mattered. She no longer held power. The neighbors had learned something stronger than rules, stronger than threats, stronger than fear. They had learned that when people stand together, no Hoa, no clipboard, and no Karen can ever divide them again. And for the first time in years, Willow Creek Lane finally felt like home.